And I'll go ahead and share my screen then.
Yeah, we see that here online.
Okay. Let me put it in full screen mode. All right. And if you guys, you can just use the down arrow.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead.
Yeah, it's good.
Hey, how are you? Good. How are you?
Good.
Just in time. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jim Bender. I'm the city engineer for Hagerstown. Thank you for coming out tonight. This is the public meeting for review of the draft safety action plan that was prepared for the city. And I'm here with Matt Mullenax from the Hagerstown Eastern Panhandle Metropolitan Planning Organization and the other consultants that are going to be introducing themselves as we go through the presentation. Just a little bit of background. What are we doing here and why did we put together this safety action plan? Back during the Biden administration, they passed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, which allocated a whole bunch of money for a lot of different things related to transportation and infrastructure. And part of the money that the Federal Highway Administration received, they decided to funnel into an effort or a program that they already had, which they called Vision Zero. And the emphasis behind Vision Zero was to try to find a way to eliminate or at least significantly reduce fatalities and serious injuries on our roadway networks. And so Federal Highway made grant money available to municipalities to work on these things. And it's actually in two parts. The first funding opportunity that came out that the city applied for was to prepare a safety action plan, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight. The reason that we did that is they have just released a second funding opportunity that would allow us to potentially get a lot more grant money to actually build or implement some of the things that are in the plan. But you can't apply for the implementation money unless you first have an approved safety action plan. So we thought, okay, let's get the safety action plan done. That may put us in line for additional funding in the future. And so that's the main reason that we're here. Like I said, the purpose of the plan, minimize or eliminate traffic deaths by, this is a long range program. So we're using 2050 as the year. As part of the plan, we wanted to identify some of the higher risk corridors or networks within the city. Where are issues? Where do we have a lot of accidents? Where do we have, a lot of complaints or concerns that were raised by citizens? And then, as I said, the whole idea was to set us up so that with this plan in place, we can look for additional funding to actually do the projects. And that's always from the city standpoint, that's always the hard part is we have ideas and we know we have projects that we need to do. It's just trying to find the money to do it. So if this works out, hopefully we'll be able to bring in some of that funding. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Matt and he can go through the next part of the presentation.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. How y'all doing? So the main agenda, we're going to, we'll do the welcome, introduce everybody that's on the team and some that are joining online right now. We'll talk about a little bit more about the Safe Streets for All program, why that's important, why it's unique. It is a federal grant program that state DOTs cannot apply for. It's really only money for local governments. And then we'll go over the action plan, the key components, talk about some of the projects, and strategies for developing and implementing ultimately some projects, hopefully, and then what the next steps are, especially with what happens with this, how we incorporate public comment, any thoughts that you all have this evening, what this means when Jim presents it to City Council alongside with any revisions based on public comment. And then again, thinking about the next round of grant funding and what might be a good project for the city to pursue. So Jim and I have introduced ourselves. So you may not know what an MPO is. You may never have heard of that. There's about 400 of us across the country. We're federally designated organizations that just do regional transportation planning. So we cover Washington County as well as Berkeley and Jefferson and West Virginia. And so in addition to myself, we have Michaela join online. Do you want to introduce yourself, Michaela?
Yeah, hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Michaela McDonough. I am the transportation planner with the MPO.
And then Jim, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Jim Fraser. I'm with Michael Baker in Nashville and the project manager of our team.
And then their pictures aren't up here. We have a murderer's row of consultants. But Rebecca Chrisman, who's with Michael Baker, if you want to introduce yourself, Rebecca.
I'm Rebecca Chrisman. I'm a traffic engineer with Michael Baker and worked on a lot of I'm sort of a safety specialist as well.
Thank you. And then the bottom four aren't able to join us this evening. And then we have Charlotte Mays from Fear and Pierce. Want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Pierce, and I'm here for my colleagues that couldn't make it today.
Thank you. Alrighty. So with that, let's talk about the schedule where we started when the planning grant was awarded to the city, where we are right now and where we're headed. So is this your side and we keep going?
Up to you.
All right, cool. You're good. All right. So, the city worked hard to get this planning grant back in fiscal year 22, and it took some time to get all the federal agreements and everything in place. But through an MOU between the city and the MPO, we're utilizing our consultants to put this together. So we had a stakeholder committee also that was helping guide the development of this plan. So folks from fire, police, Board of Ed, City Public Works, MDOT, a variety of folks, folks from the Traffic and Parking Advisory Board. And so we've met. We did a heavy round of public outreach back in September, October this past fall. And we'll go over some of those survey results. I don't know if either of you got a chance to take that, but we're happy to share what we heard from the public. We did a lot of crash analysis that led into developing priority safety corridors. And then once you have the corridors and the crash types identified, you can start to identify what are called countermeasures to help reduce severe injuries and fatalities and improve safety. Now we just got through our third public meeting. We're in our 30-day public comment period right now. That started April 2nd. It's going to wrap up May 2nd. And then we'll take, as I said, all the comments received. We're going to incorporate them into the next version of the draft plan. And that's what Jim will ultimately present to City Council tentatively at the end of May for their consideration for adoption. And as Jim said, adopting a safety action plan, you got to have, this is the key to unlocking all that federal funding through the Safe Streets for All program. Okay. Now I'll turn it to Charlemagne or Jim. Can't hide from this slide. No. All right. Thank you.
Hi. So I'm going to walk through the survey results, and just before we start on that, I just want to, first of all, define killed and serious injuries. So we call it KSI. Those are the crashes that we're really focused on. You know, the ones, the non-injuries or the property damage to accidents is not so much, but the KSIs obviously is what is the goal of what we want to eliminate. And just to give you some numbers, we use 4 years of crash data from the state of Maryland and the city, the police department as well. And almost 3,900 crashes occurred in the city itself. And out of those 3,900, 114 resulted in a KSI, either an injury or killed. And that includes, you can see the pie chart, some pedestrians, 24% of those were pedestrians, 17% was motorcycle accidents, and 4% were bicycle related. All right, what are our key outcomes of the plan? Obviously, the plan itself goes into detail on the analysis that we've done, but what comes out of it is what we call a high injury network. So those are the corridors where these KSIs are occurred more often than other corridors. Some were specific areas, and then we've stretched that along the corridor, to come up with this high injury network. And those are where the priority corridors come out of those high injury network. What are the priority corridors? And we've had 3 corridors that we analyzed in more depth. One is Antietam, and then the 2 one-way streets of Locust and Mulberry that run parallel borderline. I will say too that this analysis and this whole plan does not include interstates. All right, so we know there's it's a whole separate issue with dealing with the interstates. And also what we did not include here is the dual highway. And we know the dual highway is high crash area, but the state has already initiated a plan for the whole dual highway that safety related and other improvements. I don't know if they're just in the initial phases of that, but they're going to redesign the whole corridor to make it safer. And
Just
then
focus on city streets.
yeah, so what were the streets? So in the potential countermeasures, what we've done then is out of these 3 corridors, okay, now we're going to get in depth and say, okay, these are potential countermeasures that we know we had a KSI here as a pedestrian accident. Let's look at the pedestrian facilities and make some improvements to those. And we've actually created countermeasures along the whole corridor. And those are all part of the plan too. Okay, now going into that public survey we had back in September and October. You can see the total number of response, 1,927 responders. So that is, we've worked on other projects with the MPO and even the long range transportation plan. That is a record for us, getting these responses, getting people to respond to our surveys. It's really a good sign. So, so every project, major project that we going to do in the future, we're going to have these similar type surveys. And the survey itself, if you both taken this, so it's very user friendly, very easy to take. So we're very pleased with the results that we received. All right, and so the results I'm just going to go through on, and we kind of separated them. Driver related concerns, bicyclist concerns, and then pedestrian concerns. So for the driver concerns, you can see the pie chart has the most concerns about drivers. Distracted driving was by far the highest safety concern. There was some drunk driving. Speeding is the second highest. So those are the 2 focus areas, and then aggressive driving as well was come up on this as a major concern. For pedestrians, number 1 concern was speeding cars, especially around pedestrians in intersections, limited visibility, the lighting at these intersections, poor sidewalk conditions. Some of these sidewalks in the city, especially in the city area, are very small and very old. And then unsafe intersections, the intersections that do not have crosswalks, that type of thing, or buttons, pedestrian buttons. All right, for bike concerns, the number 1 concern was poor bike lane conditions or the lack of bike lanes, and going back again now, speeding cars, also a problem for bikers. And also the third one was the limited visibility. So, and there's some comments there as well that we highlighted. Cars not sharing the road, riding head on into cars, that type of thing. So we received a lot of great comments. So it was kind of challenging just to pick some of the top ones, but we thought those were very appropriate. All right, the next one is the road conditions. Poor road maintenance was the highest scoring. The second one was red light timing, the timing of the signals. We can go into more depth on the signals in the city. And then construction areas. Obviously, that's always a concern. Okay, this part of the survey, we highlighted for bike safety. What do you think are the top 5 contributors to safety problems? So a lot of this is sort of like what we already received, but distracted driving is the number 1 safety concern. The high speeds of cars, lack of bike lanes, and then roadway maintenance. So the dark blue are the ones we want to highlight in these sections. And then what are the contributing factors that would make you feel safer? Safer design roads, stronger laws and enforcement, and more sidewalks. The next is the results with the safety incidents. What is the nature of your incident? And the top 3 are highlighted: distracted driving for bicyclists and pedestrians, failure to obey intersection signals, and near misses. Near misses was I'm glad we added that to this survey, and I'll show you another slide. But those are the incidents that that don't really have any records of them, so it's hard to get that information. So the survey was very helpful in that part. All right, and then it just talks about what the mode of the transportation, whether they were driving or bicyclists or walking or transit. Okay, these are the markers. There was the map. You were able to put markers on it for specific locations. You had concerns, and for the overall survey, there were over 2,192 markers, which is outstanding. And you can see the density of these markers. Dual highways very highly, but the inner city of Fredericksburg and even north toward Potomac, a lot of good comments that we received, and we separated those into improvement idea, near miss, or safety issue, and we'll go into a little bit more depth here. So out of those other ones that have safety issues, and then we had the option of what is the main concern of this safety issue. So walking, driving concerns, transit concerns, or biking concerns. And you can see, again, the dual highway, the inner city network is highly populated, but there's a lot of other issues that we were able to review. All right, next, as part of our walking concern, we kind of focused in on the 2 major areas that had the most comments. One was on US 11 near with US 40 and the dual highway, or the US 40 side in Church Street. You can see the box up there. We have a lot of comments. I think that's right around, is that Burham's? Yeah, right, especially that little shopping plaza there. And then down at Eastern Boulevard, and we know that's a major concern, crossing that many lanes, and people kind of do everything at that intersection. They jump the guardrail, they can do a lot of different things. So, all right. And for driving, there were the two main areas that we highlighted was Potomac Avenue at Eastern Boulevard, and then the roundabout on Virginia Avenue. The roundabout, talking about obeying the yield signs and illegally passing at the intersection up there on Eastern Boulevard. So these should stand out to you, that you shouldn't see any surprises here, knowing if you live in the area here. All right, biking, Maryland 65, Antietam to Matthew. It's right, just right down the street from here. Yeah. And then the dual highway at Edgewood, I would think Edgewood and Mount Edna, that whole, especially all the construction going on down there as well, is very concerning and very safety.
That's that bike lane that's right in front of.
Yeah.
That's on the dual highway that materializes.
All right, here's the near misses. We received 222 markers. And what's amazing is that the majority of those occurred in the last 6 months. So over 430 of them, you can see there's a lot of near accidents occurring out there. And it's not just the accident itself, but very good information here. And just a summary, what I wanted to point out here was that it was very well distributed out of all the. Hey,
Hagerstown Safety Action Plan.
hi,
Come on in.
come on in.
Thanks for joining us. It's a great
So-
question.
So as far as age, we had a great distribution between, mid-20s all the way up to 65 plus. And then gender wise, it was almost a 50-50 split between male and female. So those are very good distribution of responders. Okay. Next, we're going to just give an update on the NOFO, we call it. That's a notice of funding opportunity.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Charmelise. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the Safe Streets for All Notice of Funding Opportunity. That's what all those letters stand for up there. So because Hagerstown has developed its safety action plan, now local agencies will be eligible for SS4A grants, as Jim mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. This include not only implementation grants, but also additional planning or demonstration activities that will help test different safety strategies. So the notice of funding opportunity just came out on March 28th of this year, and the deadline to submit it is June 26th. So we're still on time to prepare a strong application if the city decides to do so. And one important update on this year's notice of funding opportunity is a shift in priorities. So what was previously called area equity areas has now been refocused to emphasize projects to serve more within areas of persistent poverty. So the difference is basically the way each one is measured. Areas of persistent poverty looks at how if the community has been below a certain percentage of what is considered the poverty line for many years in a row. And it also looks at if there's strong economic benefits in the areas where the improvements are going to be applied. So here in this slide, we see how Hagerstown Safety Action Plan checks all the boxes for the SS4A grant funding. Each of the 9 criteria requires or required criteria like crash data involving the community and setting clear safety goals was thoroughly addressed in our plan. So we work with local partners. We held, this is the 3rd public meeting, so there was 2 more before this one. And we analyzed where crashes were happening and why. So something very important is that we were also proactive in updating the plan because we've been developing it for a couple of months now. So we updated the language to match this year's SS4A grant opportunity. And that means we revised the language and made sure that we are focusing on underserved communities and those economic opportunities. Now here in this slide, we get a sneak peek of what that plan has. So the plan is organized into 5 main chapters, starting with why the plan is needed, how it was developed, what crash details it has within safety elements within Hagerstown, and what strategies can help us move forward to that 0 death goal. It wraps up by looking at different tracking processes and how we're tracking, how we will be tracking progress over time. When you all are reviewing the plan in your own time, there's a few components that you should pay more attention to. Later in the presentation, we'll talk more about chapter 4, which is the chapter that contains most of the countermeasures and strategies we are recommending to improve the roads in the city. So over here in this slide, what the map is showing is the final high injury network we developed for the city. HIN, high injury network. So the HIN identifies streets where most serious crashes are happening, as Jim mentioned. And we use crash data to rank the corridors by severity and frequency. So when it was where most crashes were happening and where more severe the crashes were, and we develop a scoring system. And reflected in the dark blue are the corridors with the highest scores, and the lighter blues are corridors with lower scores. However, from all the streets in the city, these are still all the highest ranking ones. And also, something very important to note in this map is the background shading. So what it shows is the levels of community need. As you'll notice, many of the high injury network corridors overlap with areas that are in high community needs areas. So this helps reinforce the focus of the plan and reassure the community impact it will have. And here in this slide, what we see is similar information to what we were looking at in the map. However, here we see a couple more details. We see the extensions of the corridors, how the amount of vulnerable road users, meaning people outside of a vehicle, so people walking, biking, or in a motorcycle that were impacted, how many of these crashes resulted in KSI, and if there are within transportation disadvantaged community areas. And in addition to all the analysis we've done within like what the community input was, where the crashes were happening, and what corridors needed change. We also identify solutions to address signalized intersections, mid-block crossings, and speed. These are also where and why these crashes are happening. So another important part of the plan that we will discuss now, so I'll turn it back to Jim, and he will provide a little bit more details on these countermeasures and how we're trying to address these.
And before Jim starts, I want to point something out on this slide that you might be questioning this. You can see that number 2 and number 3 are East Avenue and Church Streets, which are basically the same street, just different pieces. And they score highly on this chart. The reason that we'll get into later with why it wasn't selected as one of the priority corridors is during the course of this 4 or 5 year data collection period, we changed the flow direction on East Avenue, East Avenue and North Avenue. And we felt that these numbers probably include before we made that change and after that change, which we think is probably improved some of the things on East Avenue. So I think that's the reason, even though they're high ranking on this chart, that's the reason we didn't select them as a study.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you guys have any questions or want to see something closer, by all means, just let us know. So now we're going to get into, okay, let's look at these priorities and what's the potential countermeasures that we can implement to improve our safety. There's two approaches. One is the 3 corridors is one approach. That's the next step. But for this, it's the citywide systematic approaches. So we've identified 3 areas: the signalized intersections. We look at that across the whole city, the mid-block pedestrian crossings, and then the speeding issue. All right, and then on the right these are federal highways, what they call proven safety countermeasures. So these are just kind of like examples or ideas that could work based on the situation. So we utilize those for the most part. We do have other approaches to some of these countermeasures, but we'll go into detail on these 3 different ones now. And I know this is confusing, and I know it's in our report as well, but just to give you an idea here. First of all, you have the map, and you see the circle of the downtown area. I think the total is 113 signals total in the city, and 56 of those are in this downtown corridor. And these downtown corridor is also the majority of where the accidents occurred. All right. And then on the right side, we have a list of the countermeasures, and then the collision history. You can see out of these intersections in the central district, there are over 1,167 accidents. Out of those total collisions, you have, what they were, whether it's an automobile or the vulnerable users, the total number of accidents, and then the total number of KSIs. So you can see 18 KSIs occurred at intersections. We did have motorcycle accidents, and the pedestrian number is very high as well, 8. And then we looked at the pattern out of those 1,167 collisions. What type of accident was it? You can see whether there were angle crashes, head-on crashes, rear-end crashes, signal vehicle crashes, or property damage, or others are unknown, and then you have the pedestrians. So for the 2 highest ones were the angle crashes and the rear-end crashes at the signals. All right, and then we also list a few of the planned projects that are ongoing in these that relate to these signals. So there's a lot of signal pedestrian improvements. That's the dual highway improvements, all those pedestrian improvements along all those intersections.
One thing I'll point out in downtown Hagerstown, the shaded in figure that has a bunch of traffic signals in it, that is also a coordinated signal network. All of those signals are tied together as far as their timing, so that if you start down McDonald's on Franklin Street, you're driving the speed limit, you have a chance of getting the whole way through town without stopping, because the signals are coordinated, they're timed, so that you can make that progression. So that's the significance of that figure in the middle of downtown Hagerstown.
Yeah. And I will point out too, in the plan itself, and if you're looking at it electronically, there's links to the countermeasures for the federal highway site, but there's also a link to our data set map. We have all the data that we use for the analysis, all the survey results are on a map set that you can actually look at and see all the different data and all the, it's a lot more than you could possibly review itself, but it's all out there and available for review. All right. So the next citywide approach was the mid-block pedestrian crossings and crashes. All right. There's a total of 81 crashes. But 2 areas that we did, hold on. Sorry about that. But Salem Avenue and Burham near St. George, that cluster is also a big area where we've witnessed a lot of these crashes But as far as the history, in 81 mid-block crashes, and 14 of them were fatal or the KSIs. And then we also have the time of day and whether or not, and we also even include the impaired crashes in there, where there were 4 of those. So all the different potential measures to include there, obviously we want to get people out of these mid-block crossings and onto the intersection crossings. All right, now the speeding, citywide speeding. We all know it's a potential issue here. And we've identified the main corridors of speeding, and we also were able to obtain speeding citations. So I know some of those were targeted areas that resulted in more speeding tickets, but we were able to see where speeding tickets were given. In fact, one of the major countermeasures is the enforcement of the speeding. So some of these main corridors here, I think that's Wilson, Burham's, Salem, up Potomac, and then Eastern Boulevard were all the main corridors for speeding where accidents have occurred. And you see there's 138 total crashes that related to speeding, and 11 of those were KSIs. And you could see the notable crash patterns too. There were more single vehicle accidents related to speeding. Okay. Next, we're going to look specifically at the 3 corridors. Locust and Marlboro, we kind of grouped together since they run one way parallel to each other, and then in Tatum Street. The countermeasures that we're going to show you, they're all included in the appendix in the report with planning level cost estimates. And you'll also see whether or not it's a short term, meaning measures that can be relatively easy to implement, medium term, and then long term. So a lot of these are not like the full, should not be implemented as a whole package. It's whether or not, okay, we have this much money available, we can look at short term, or if we're going to go after one of these implementation grants, then we can look at these at the long term, more construction oriented type of improvements. Okay, so this is Locust and Mulberry Streets. There's a lot of information here, I know, and it's a lot of detail to really see it all. But just to highlight a few things. First of all, the collision history, 313 crashes along these two roads with 11 KSIs. And you can see the majority of those are car related, with 7 of the fatalities related to car crashes. The collision patterns, rear end at signals and angle crashes, some of the turning movements are causing accidents as well. And then we got some plan work. So some of these countermeasures, we got, the first thing we wanted to recommend here was, is there a need for all the signals along these corridors? So we're recommending to actually conduct some traffic warrants, signal warrants, whether or not is it still useful there, or can they be converted to a stop sign, a 4-way stop sign at those intersections, or even a 2-way stop signs to improve some of the traffic and some of the, get rid of some of the potential accidents of people running these red lights or other things. So that's one of the recommendations. We also improved the pavement markings, pedestrian features at the signals. So there's a whole list of things. I don't want to, if you're interested, we'll be glad to walk through it all with you. But you can see there's a lot of information there and a lot of good ideas. Same with Antietam. I know there was keeping in mind too, that these are countermeasures to improve safety. These are not like I know Jim and I talked about it, like, well, maybe this may not be a feasible approach to one, which is fair. But as far as improving safety, these are measures that can be implemented. So by all means, they're strictly safety oriented, and whether or not the city moves forward with a package of them or some of them is really up to the city, because everything related to this too is all pre-engineering. If you look at that, by the time a project gets built, you go through a planning phase, and you go through a preliminary engineering phase, a final engineering phase, and then you go to construction. Everything in this we're showing you is all preliminary planning level of pre-engineering type of measures. All right, and then you can see the accident history at the bottom there, 154 crashes along the road and 4 fatalities, all crashes. So.
Jim, I think you want to talk about the main recommendation for Antietam Street. That's sort of key, I think, that generated a lot of comments. And
would you like to?
that's right. So one of the things that the data showed is on certain parts of Antietam Street, mainly West Antietam, out at where it starts at Washington Square and then comes down the hill to Her Hands and on. The data showed that in those couple segments, there was a higher number of head-on crashes. And I think there are several factors to that. The road up through there is narrow, there's on-street parking. So that's a challenge. And then you continue east on 18th Street and you get to the dry bridge at Prospect, where you've got a fairly narrow bridge opening, with walls on either side to go through. And so I think that the team, in thinking about that and thinking about safety, they said, maybe the solution is to make Antietam Street one way eastbound from up at Washington Square, basically the whole way through town to Cannon Avenue or even Cleveland Avenue. And I think that certainly has merit from a safety point, like Jim said. It would address some of these issues with head-on crashes and some of the other concerns that we noticed. From an operational standpoint, to make Antietam Street a one-way street would be challenging, I would say, at the least. And it's something that the city will certainly consider. And we'll probably study a little bit more, but that would be a major change. It has an effect on not only regular residential traffic, it would have an effect on emergency response. So I think that this is a good example of what if you look at a corridor from a safety standpoint, you may end up with recommendations that are really kind of opposed to the operational function of it. And that's part of what we need to work through now. Is we know we're making a commitment to address safety. How much of this can we implement in the future and still maintain the function that we have now?
Very good. Okay. And this is our next steps to finalizing the plan. Obviously, we're at a public meeting now. Matt mentioned the public comment period ends next week. And any responses that we did receive, I think we're close to almost 10 now. We actually received response or questions and comments. We will provide a response and include all this information in the appendix. And then we will finalize the safety action plan for Jim and folks to take it to the city council for formal adoption. That is planned this month or next month. I'm sorry, we're not May yet. And then that NOFO we have there too. If we are going to pursue a grant application, that grant application is due by the 26th of June. So it's pretty fast forward moving from here on out, but at least, we have the plan to pursue anything that we want to. there is a local match to those grants. So that's also an issue of.
It's a big issue.
Is it-
Because under this funding opportunity, the way I've read it, the minimum amount funding that you're supposed to request for an implementation grant is 2.5 million. And that requires a 20% match from the city. So you're looking at least $500,000 that the city council, they're going through their budget process now. And we put an earmark in there for matching funds if we get this big grant. But that has to be approved by the city council as part of the budget approval. So we have a really tight time frame here, and yet the council has not yet made a decision on, is the budget okay the way it is, or is it going to stay in, or are we going to pull that and put that money somewhere else? So, yeah, it's the good and bad of these federal grants that it's free money, but you have to put up a good bit of local
Yeah.
money to make it work.
And this is, we talked about the infrastructure grant, infrastructure act, or the money, the funding sources. We're in year 4 or 5, starting fiscal year 26. So there's fiscal year 27 is the last one. So there should be one more round of SS4A grant opportunities next spring. They'll all come out every year right around the same time frame, which is the March time frame, with a quick turnaround to get them in. So you need to be project ready and have a plan accordingly.
I'd also say on that too is, as we've seen with the new administration, there have been funds appropriated to different programs and different agencies that are now being pulled back or redistributed. So you don't, even though, as Jim said, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act was a 5-year funding that was approved by Congress, but I can't say for sure. I don't think anybody can say for sure that that 5th year funding is going to be there.
I'll turn it back over to you guys for now.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody. Thanks again for coming out. So I think at this time we'll entertain any questions or discussion. It can be as specific as what's going on in your street, or it can be as wide ranging as something that you've seen. I know one of the citywide priorities involving speeding, we've received a number of follow-up comments with concerns up at north at Potomac Avenue. And the city is looking at ways to try to get some of the mobile resources that they have up there to try to mitigate some of that. So folks are definitely letting us know about the speeding that's on Potomac. And when you drive through there, you can see if cars aren't parked, there's a lot of asphalt, right? Houses are back from the road. A driver could feel comfortable speeding probably fairly easily, but yeah, so did you all have any questions or comments, and anything that was covered in the survey results?
Or anything, if you read the.
Or anything. Yeah.
That raised questions in your mind.
So the way the byline read, there aren't going to be 5 roundabouts on Antietam Street. There was one that was recommended for evaluation, and that was down where Winchester Avenue, or gosh, listen to me. Sorry, Washington Avenue, Washington Street, and all those come together. You could probably see that more easily, right down here, versus where it starts to really squeeze up and come through past the new parking deck and everything. So that's really the only one. So yeah, any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
At Church Street, corner of Winter and Church. I'm going east on Church, and there's a stop sign on Winter right there by Grace United Methodist Church.
Mhm.
That big yellow truck did not stop, and I had to slam my brakes. And I get that all the time. So how do you see a stop sign in better than a red light?
Right. So what we've seen in the crash history on some of the signalized intersections on Locust and Mulberry is that due to the age of some of the signals, when their cycle starts running, when someone approaches the stoplight, is longer than what you typically expect. And so folks then are stopping, but then they're blowing through red lights, even though it's still a red and the opposite direction's a green. And when they do that, it's not a near miss, right? Something happens. So somebody is driving through, somebody's walking through, and so that creates that issue. So the stop sign, if they, especially like late at night, they stop if it's their they have the right of way or nobody else is coming, they can proceed through. In your specific instance, that's a challenge, right? And we heard a lot in the survey. Sorry, hopefully I'm not. Just a lot of concerns about driver behavior. So lots of text is a little small, but distracted driving, speeding, aggressive driving, right? All that. And so when it comes to behavior, it could be that intersection needs to be looked at ways to slow folks down on the approach. So they're already slowing down, going through the intersection. So they're more prone to stop, or it's an enforcement issue, right? So that's not a signalized intersection, right? That particular one, that's just stop signs. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
At that intersection. So they're sitting here.
And you're going through. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and the sight distance
So-
is not great there if you're on winter, because of the church.
You are very correct, and I said, well, I usually, when I go up to my church, I always go up winter, and I very
You have to
slowly
creep out into
creep.
the intersection.
to make sure nobody's flying down Church Street. As they do.
Did you want to add something, Rebecca? Oh, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, so I am having some internet connectivity issues, so some things are dropping in and out, and I don't know if you guys can hear me. Um,
We can hear you right now.
Okay,
That came
great.
through okay.
So there are what are called like stop sign conspicuity measures where there are sort of traffic engineering measures that are known to improve sort of driver's awareness of stop signs, retroreflective strips on the posts, bigger signs, retroreflectivity on the sign, advanced stop ahead signing, stop bars, so pavement markings. There are certain safety things for known locations where people keep missing the stop signs. Or like if there's street side parking, you're not supposed to have parking within a certain distance of the stop sign so that drivers can see it. Bigger signs, height placement, but also a four-way stop um, also is an additional safety measure because even if your driver misses it, nobody else is blowing through on the cross street. And that's frequent for like very urban locations where there are sight distance problems where you have to creep forward to even see if anybody's coming because stopping at the stop sign you can't. And so four-way stop is another sort of conspicuity or safety measure also, in lieu of a signal where the volumes just don't support a traffic signal.
Yeah, that's a good note. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it would be warranted. Does Maryland do LED? Probably not. It probably had to be a really high crash area, like on the frame of the sign and going down.
I mean, I see them like out at the Valley Mall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That has been added to the MUTCD just in the recent edition
Oh,
as
okay.
a standard conspicuity measure.
Okay. Good. That's good to know. So there are some tools in the toolbox then for improving safety, in addition to just putting up a stop sign. So.
And I guess something too, sort of related to this, but if you're talking about Locust and Mulberry, Rebecca did, and when she was looking at that and sort of landed on the recommendation that we really ought to see if those traffic signals are all warranted, and should we look at converting some of those intersections to stop control, four-way or two-way stop control. It seems counterintuitive, but what I see just, driving around Hagerstown, driving, especially on Locust Street, is now with the traffic signals, I see a lot of speeding with people trying to make the next light. They know the timing of those signals. They know if I don't step on it, I'm not gonna make the signal at North Avenue, so in some ways, I think it changes driver behavior in a bad way, and it's encouraging them to do things they really shouldn't. If everybody was just driving the speed limit, I think the timing on the signals would work and wouldn't have that issue, but then people get stuck at a red light and they get frustrated. And so when that light goes green, they're gonna try to make up time, so speeding. So I think from that standpoint, switching some of these intersections from traffic signals to stop signs, it seems, part of it seems counterintuitive, but it may actually be a way to improve safety.
Yeah. I wonder, so like looking at the high injury network, if you were just hanging out with your buddies or your barbecue or doing something, it's like, and somebody's like, what would you say are the most dangerous streets in Hagerstown? Would this be, with some of the streets you see here, what might come to your mind first? Or are there any surprises or things you're not expecting that showed up there? Oh, yeah. So let's, oh, you know what? You said you have the map up, is that right?
I do.
Maybe that would be easier to look at than the, sorry, Jim, give me just a sec.
Be,
So I know which roads are which, but.
So that's right here. Oh, yeah, sorry. Is that right there?
Yeah.
Now we're talking. Okay, so let me turn this off and then. Okay, and there we go. All right, sorry. Yep, take it away, Jim.
Yeah, so hopefully this is a little bit easier, but this is Virginia Avenue coming up to City Park. At Park Circle, it's right there. And then this is Locust, this is Mulberry, this is Potomac, this is Church and East. Out here's Eastern Boulevard. This light line is Basil Boulevard, heading up toward the mall. And then we get my bearings here. So this is that's right, this is Nottingham, Devonshire, Wakefield, left side. And then obviously up there at the top is Northern Avenue. So hopefully that.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. That's-
Yes, sir. Everything was great. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Jim. See what I mentioned, Church Street, does everything, I mean, what are your all's experiences on Locust and Mulberry? Something similar, or you see a lot of folks, you see like a lot of bad pedestrian behavior all over the place, or? Mhm. Yeah, that's a tough nut to crack over there. Yeah. And I see pedestrians on Locust, especially like on, like if I'm going through early on trash day before the cans have been pulled back, right? They'll just come up, see it, they've got earbuds in, they just step right into the street, right? And then pop back over. So that's a challenge as well. But to me, what I think is so powerful about doing a high injury network, it's like if we can be surgical, right, and addressing the crash history with killed and severely injured accidents or crashes, excuse me, that are happening on those roads. Because I think it was it 47% of all fatals and severely injured, I think, are just on these roads, these few roads right here, which is less than half of the 122 miles that are part of the city's network. So it really gives the city locations to really hone in on. So, yeah. Any other questions or comments? Anything you like to re-review that was part of the presentation? Stephen, any questions in the back? All right. Oh, fair enough. All righty. Well, oh, please, yeah.
So I was reading a little bit about it today because I only found out about it today. But I saw that one of the solutions was to try and narrow some of the streets. Are you able to go into some detail about how I do to accomplish that?
Yeah, so I believe, and I'm going to stop sharing that and pull the maps back up real quickly. This one? Yeah. So it's, when you have oh, there we go. It's a challenge in an urban setting when you only have so much space to work with, right? The right of way is only so much pavement width. So a lot of those areas to narrow it called for extending the sidewalks. So that's where that space would be replaced with. So if you narrow the lanes, folks typically drive a little bit slower, and then the widening will give more room for pedestrians to hopefully avoid like some of the behavior we were just talking about. So again, that would probably be in spot areas, maybe at intersections where there's a noted collision history, or we have pedestrian accidents that have happened as well.
Oh,
Go ahead.
it-
Rebecca.
It's also just pavement markings. So if you put in an edge line next to a curb, so, and I actually live on a street that's it's probably got 15-foot lanes, but they've painted an edge line that's 4 feet in from the curb line. And so drivers feel more constrained, and studies show that in and of itself, just painting a more narrow lane will slow drivers down, not substantially, but a little. And then by doing that in sort of a road diet situation or a reconfiguration like for Locust and Mulberry, if we were to narrow those lanes, you could actually then have room for a painted buffer between the lane and the bike lane. Because a lot of I mean, it was an amazing number of bicycle crashes on these two corridors. And then it's for the speeding corridors, it was recommended to narrow those lanes to again, possibly provide room for bicycle lanes. And then that makes the drivers sort of drive a little safer. Or like Matt was saying, to then bring the curb line in and make wider sidewalks. And then that's less room for pedestrians to cross. They can be more focused on where the cars are coming from when they cross.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next comment was, did you consider maybe like implementing bike lanes as well into part of the narrowing the street? Imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And it could be, so when we call out the bike lanes, it could be buffered bike lanes, right? It could just be lines like maybe out here that are just striping. It could involve flex posts or things like that, which also could help narrow and create. I think some of the bike crashes, trying to remember, but I think there was one or two here that the cyclists are biking contraflow, right? Where you see you're driving along and all of a sudden a bicyclist is coming this way right on Locust, and it's very unexpected. So there could be room for two-way cycle tracks, right? Again, if you just pull in, take a little bit from the travel lane. And the bike lanes that are on Locust, I've been here long enough to remember that before there were bike lanes there was so much pavement, you were jostling for position, right? Because like you could be driving along and someone's like, well, there's enough asphalt here, I can get around you. So it did, to Rebecca's point about just painting, striping the roads, that is something that has made a change, at least out here. So yeah.
And it wasn't part of the study corridor, but another street in Hagerstown that over the years, we've considered doing a road diet on is Northern Avenue. You know, it's 4 lanes, 2 in each direction. And we talked a little bit about what if it was 1 lane in each direction and a center turn lane. You know, you could still access the businesses on either side, but you only have one through lane. And we had talked about doing that. And then what we found is, like at Northern Middle, when they installed the speeding cameras at the schools, we noticed that that definitely had an impact on speeding on Northern Avenues. And so I think we kind of pulled back on the idea of doing the road diet, at least for now. But that's a different situation, but that's also a road diet where you're decreasing the width of the road or the number of lanes to try to have an effect on traffic flow.
Yep. Which actually reduces conflict points, right? It gets, you know, because those cars that want to make those lefts, you get them out of the travel lane. They don't have cars behind them necessarily that aren't trying to do the same movement. So, yeah. All right. Yeah, thank you for that. So, all right. Yeah, so those are all the incidents, all the crashes, in and through the city, with red being fatals and then the orange being severely injured or serious injured. Yeah, any other questions or comments? I mean, we'll be here a little bit after the forming. We'll turn the cameras off. We'll stop recording the meeting. And then if I could show you all just real quick. So our website is hepmpo.com. I think it was in the article today, but on our page, we've got links to the plans. Probably the quickest way is to come to meetings, about us meetings. And then if you scroll down, you'll see the Hagerstown Safety Action Plan meeting. So the draft plan, the web map that we're just showing, and then even tonight's presentation, those are all posted there. So go to the cities. Yeah. So there's all kinds of, so here's the killed and severely injured by the mode of transportation. You can select crash filters based on the crash type or the primary crash factor that was identified. You know, Jim Frazier talked earlier about all the signals in and through town and where crashes are occurring in relation to signals. This is what Jim Bender was talking about with the interconnected downtown network. There's also a couple other coordinated or signals that are on the similar system, same system, throughout the town. All the survey results, and you can just come and click on one, and all the data that was provided, you know, is part of that. And then the MPO, we actually a few years ago, 2 years ago now, did a similar safety action plan, and we made sure to incorporate any comments that were provided within city limits at that time. All the sidewalks, police boundaries, corridors that Maryland Department of Transportation has identified as priorities, all that information we have all right in here. And then, yeah, here's the here are the crash points on. Let me turn that off. So talking about Locust and the boundary of what we included in the corridor study of that. So yeah, all that information is up there for anybody to look at and review. All right. And then, yeah, so May 2nd, and then comments. If you have any, you can, sorry. You can on the MPO's website, and I'll have business cards if anybody wants it. You can just email me directly, or we have like the contact us. It just send it right through. We're happy to receive it. I mean, really, public comment period never stops when you work in public service, but we would love to hear from you all once you've had a chance to review this, or provide any of the comments you know, that you shared this evening. So with that, I'll go ahead and we'll close the meeting out. And then again, we'll be around for another 15 minutes or so, and happy to talk about any items further.
But thank you all for coming out. It's important for us to get feedback from the people that live here and have to deal with
Absolutely.
traffic in the city. So
You all are the ground truth. That this is, we do the plans, work through the data. We have our collective experiences, but we need a ground truth. We need to pass the sniff test. So thank you for giving your time this evening to come out and share and listen to us. So.
All right, I'm going to close it up. Thanks, Rebecca and Michaela.
Bye. Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.